For me, it's very practical. It happens every trip overseas. It happened again, coming back from Kenya, Somalia, 13 million people at risk. Rains have failed 3 years in a row. 750,000 kids will die in the next 6 months if we can't help them. Rarely is development this crude, but in this instance it's this crude. The number of lives we save will depend on the amount of money we raise. That's how simple and crude it is in the Ethiopia, Kenya, Somalia, Djibouti famine. The reason is that the West is utterly obsessed with its own troubles. There's the Greek meltdown and European sovereign debt. So European nations aren't giving to this 13 million crisis. America is cutting aid. It's extraordinary. Here in Australia we have bipartisan support, and Scott Morrison has been a strong voice within the Liberal Party, and you need to support this voice of bipartisan support to increase aid. That is incredibly important because Australia is the third largest government donor in the world to the Kenya, Somalia, Ethiopia crisis. We're not the third biggest country. We're the third biggest donor because we have bipartisan support in increasing aid from what is 35 cents in every $100 to 50 cents. That's the bipartisan support. By the way, that should shock you. The Lowy Institute did a survey asking Australians, how much do you think we give in aid? Most said, oh, it's about 10% of our budget. And then they asked, is that figure right? Well, in our own troubles, this is turning inwards, probably it's a bit high, about 7 or 8% would be right. It's 0.35%. It's completely out of whack with what we think. But just holding bipartisan support to increase aid is really difficult in this time. Well, when you ask how generous we are, Britain's at 0.5% and going to 7%. And I've got to say, this is why aid shouldn't be a partisan issue. David Cameron, a Conservative leader, slashed and burnt the British budget because they're in recession. I've just been in London. Things are tight. The one area Cameron, a Conservative leader, refused to slash under great pressure was the aid budget. He said, we will not compromise our promises to the world's poor. Britain is one of the other few governments giving to Kenya, Somalia. There was leadership. They're already well above us. We've got a target of 0.5 by 2015. Britain will be at 0.7 by 2013. And they've gone through a real recession. That's why this issue is a real moral issue of not turning inwards. Well, for World Vision, it is incredibly hard to get this message through. I took Mel Doyle from Sunrise. I don't know if any of you saw the story, to the Kenya-Somalia border. It was a very emotional experience. She was in tears most of the time. What you see is just overwhelming. Children who are going to die because the world has turned inwards. It is that simple. It's why I convinced our Foreign Minister, Kevin Rudd. That was a slip, wasn't it? Kevin Rudd. See, I am a prophet. Kevin Rudd, I convinced him to institute, first time in Australian history, a dollar for dollar matching on the Kenya-Somalia program. If you give $50, I know the feeling, you go, what difference is it going to make? Well, your $50 you give to World Vision for Kenya, Somalia, the government will match with $50. You've given $100. And Kevin Rudd's done it because he went there to Ethiopia and Kenya, and he was overwhelmed. Here is just an extraordinary, silent, slow-moving tsunami. And our brains are wired as humans in a certain way. When it's a tsunami, and Kevin went to Bande Aceh like I did, when it's a tsunami, we all see it, we go, that is terrible. That could have been me, I've got to give. And we give. World Vision raised $105 million for the tsunami. Australians were magnificent. For Haiti, because it's dramatic and sudden, we saw the earthquake, we gave. We raised $12 million in a couple of weeks. And by the way, most Australians weren't too sure where Haiti was. I was at the petrol station and this guy recognised me and he said, Tim, it's just terrible what's happening in Tahiti, isn't it? I said, Tahiti, what's happened? But he was giving because we saw an earthquake and our brains are wired to go, that's terrible. That could have been me. When it's a slow-moving disaster, just rains continually failing, our brains aren't wired to respond. We just don't respond. The world hasn't responded, and this is bigger than the tsunami. 750,000 kids are going to die. It's why I do appeal to you, there's no bite, but here it is, to have a think about matching a dollar, whatever dollar you can give, knowing the government will match it, because this silent killer is just huge. It is huge. Or go to the Channel 7 website and see Mel Doyle's report from there, and just how overwhelmed she was seeing it.